Good afternoon and welcome. My name is William Rallison and I'm the lead community gardener for the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. This afternoon we're going to do a planter workshop for spring herbs and a couple of other flowers. And this is in conjunction with the Bee Superhighway Initiative and the Ecology Centre at Holland Park. So before we start, we're just going to have a bit of an overview of what you need for this workshop. The idea is that we're going to plant herbs which will be beneficial not only for us, for the kitchen, for flavouring, but also for pollinating insects. And when I say pollinating insects, we're talking about beneficial insects which will fly throughout the country, from borough to borough, from street to street, and providing a little bit more forage. If you've got a tiny little bit of food on your windowsill or in your garden, that's all good for them. So what we're going to need for this is a suitable planter. This is quite a small one which will fit easily on a windowsill. And then we've got some gravel, which I'm just going to show you, which is very fine, well not that fine actually, it's quite stony, but it's sufficient for drainage at the bottom of the planter. And then we need a suitable growing medium. We've got some multi-purpose compost here, which is full of nutrients, enough for one season's growth, so you don't need to worry about feeding your herbs or your plants for the first season. Other than that, we've got a selection of plants I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a moment. But the first thing to do really is to make sure you've got drainage holes in your planter. Now you can do this with a stout pair of scissors. I'm using garden secateurs, and very carefully keeping the blade away from me. There's these little holes which are pre-made in the feet of the planter, and you'll find these in most planters, and you just need to release that little film of plastic so the water can drain out. So that's done, and I can check that by holding up to the light, and I can see, yes, the sunlight is coming through, so I've got some nice good holes there. What I'm going to do now is pop a layer of gravel into the planter, and this is just a very small layer of about 1 centimetre or so, and I'm just going to spread that out evenly. There may be 1 or 2 stones that come through the bottom, but don't worry about that. So there you go, you've got your nice layer at the very bottom. Now what we want to do next is put some a layer, not terribly deep layer, of the compost, and this will give our base for our plants and their roots, which we'll take out of the pots very shortly. So that's quite a small layer, probably about 2 to 3 centimetres. And there you go, you've got your first layer. Now the reason we don't fill it all at once is that we need to place the plants in and then backfill around them. So to release the plants from the pots, they're all in these plastic pots. This is a slightly larger pot, this is sage. So what you can do is you just turn it upside down, give it a squeeze, and it will pop out. Now what you can see here is, it's not pot bound at all, you've got some nice roots there, so just loosen them up very, very slightly with your fingers and thumb. And this is the largest one, so we're going to pop that in the middle. And just look at the level where you are. So it doesn't really want to be too high, but at the same time, we don't want to bury this completely under the level. The level here with the design on this one is actually a good indicator. It goes all the way around. So you want your soil level approximately the same as that. Don't need to be too pedantic about this, but it does help. Right, our second plant is a marjoram. And again, just have a look at the roots and just tease them out very, very slightly. Again, this isn't root bound at all, it's looking very nice. And I have watered these slightly before, just so they're nice and moist. Now, because the root depth is a little bit less on that one, we're going to pop a tiny little cushion of compost, because what we want is all the plants at the same soil depth. And then we've got some chives. You can see the very nice white fibrous roots there. And again, this is in a smaller pot, so this is going to have a little cushion as well, slightly in the corner, that one. And just sort of do a quick visual check. They're pretty much the same level there. We've got this nice flowering strawberry plant, and you can see the roots on that one are a little bit more developed. So again, a little teasing out of that just helps them become established. And again, another little cushion of soil just to get it up to the level of the sage plant there. And that's going towards the front because it's going to trail probably over the top. And then the last one is thyme, which is really lovely for insects. And you can make tea with that one. And traditionally it's used a lot in cookery. So again, tease the roots a tiny little bit there. There's very little to do actually because these aren't pot bound at all. So I'm just going to do a last cushion for that one. And then check the soil levels, which is looking pretty good. Now that looks fairly nice and full to me, not too full. Just going to tip that up slightly so you can have a quick look in there. So what we want to do now is backfill to get the soil really nicely firmed up around the pots, the roots of the flowers, the herbs as they come out of the pot. They're going to retain that pot shape, but if we get some soil around them, they'll soon develop more roots, so some of those fine roots come through. Now, it might seem a little bit messy at this stage, don't worry about that, you can clean it up afterwards. But the idea is to get your fingers really down there, pushing those, the soil around the formation of the potted plants. So, getting through this compost quite well. Now, the compost is fairly moist, and ideally you want something that's not too dry, but certainly you don't want it soaking wet. The reason for that, if it's too wet, it's going to be a little bit sort of sticky, and you won't get it around the base of the plants quite so easily. Give that a bit of a tap down as you're doing that. That helps to get any pockets of air out. And that's all beginning to come together. So while we're doing this, what we're going to do on the actual call is we're going to take some more questions about the plants themselves from you. And we can talk about more of the benefits of the plants and some of the usages as we go along. But really, we've got some key things here which will attract the pollinators. Now, most of these herbs have quite small flowers. They're not showy flowers like you'd have in a border, but they're very small, quite often white and pink in clusters, and these are really attractive to pollinating insects. And when I say pollinating insects, we're talking about bees. There's lots of different bees. There's hoverflies, some butterflies, occasionally moths. The things that we sort of enjoy and associate with flowers. Right, another tap down. Now I think that's looking pretty good. And a guide here is that you've got this other layer. It's like a line that goes around the top. So you use that as your guide to get your soil up there. Now what you could do now, if you wanted to, is top dress with a little layer of gravel. And what the benefits of that is it just keeps any weeds down that might start growing, or discourages also slugs and snails because they don't like the gravelly feeling, and it makes it quite attractive as well. It's just a nice little finish. So again, not a huge amount, just probably a centimetre or so. Give it a tap down, and that goes all the way around. You can kind of guide it in with your fingers. I don't like wearing gloves to do these sort of jobs. If you have got sensitive skin, you could always wear some latex gloves, or the rubbery based ones. Some people have allergies to them, but so be a bit careful. There you go. So that's pretty much. I just hold that up at an angle. So you've got all the herbs there, looking quite natural. They're really going to fill out over the next few weeks. Which brings me just to some tips about looking after the planter. Now clearly you want to make sure this is in a safe place, so not sort of a precarious windowsill, somewhere secure where it's not going to get knocked over, somewhere not too hot but with enough light, and then the watering regime for something like this. I'm not going to water it now, but this is a kind of watering can with what we call a rose, which disperses the water through these really, really tiny holes. And what you need to do here is give it a really nice good soak, and then don't touch it for probably at least a week. for that to settle in. And then, as I said, don't really need feeding, but just pick out anything that's sort of litter or stuff that's blowing around in the wind, something like that. And really, that's your planter. So that's going to last several months. During the summer, you'll get the strawberry flowers. You might get a few little ripe strawberries, and hopefully, you'll see some lovely insects. Thank you.